So I'd like to say at the beginning that my experience is limited, if I can say so, to living in rural areas. I've never been in a big town. It was always very remote places, like Rutshuru in the northern part, northeastern part of the Congo. And there's so many things to tell you about that I would like to concentrate on a few topics that are a bit specific. But first of all, I'd like to stress the extraordinary feeling of security that was prevailing in the Congo when we were living there. Something that is hardly imaginable by people living now in the country. You could walk from one place to the other. You could travel by road, you could travel by car, on foot, horse, bicycle, whatever, and never would happen, nothing would happen. And if you have a look at the book that André Sharkov gave you, The Traveler's Guide, you will get the impression that it was possible to go almost everywhere, the place you wanted, without having the slightest problem on the road. Be it a big axis from Nile, what they call from Cape Town to Cairo, was crossing Belgian Congo, or on the small bush tracks, no problem. And even the river crossing pontoons, no problem. And one thing that you will not find in the Traveler's Guide is some instructions in matters of security, because that had been superfluous. And to give an example, that this feeling of security was not based on fear for authority. We were not, imposing that authority. It was a kind of respect. And I'll tell you just one story. It's about one of my colleagues in Katanga told me once he had been reported that in a remote village, 125 kilometers from the main town of the territory, about 20 palm trees had been illegally cut down. So they were not allowed to cut palm trees before they were ripe. So they were a bit eager to have the palm trees they have on top of them something very, very, very good to eat. We call it the heart of the palm tree. It is like a salad, and they like it. So they cut the trees off. He went there, no police escort, of course, no military, only his own orderly, and to find out what happened. And eventually, because he was a judge of the police court, he sentenced 19 of them to jail. And then he told them, and now you will go to the territory's main town by yourselves, and you will there. And he gave them, each one, an order to jail, which they put in a bamboo, and off they went. They had that bamboo stick in one hand, on top of their head they had the belongings, and they walked 5 days. And when he arrived at the main township, after his inspection tour, he saw them all aligned nicely in front of the door of the prison, waiting to be checked in, like a group of tourists waiting at the reception desk of a hotel. That's how it happened. And it was not out of fear, once again, it was really kind of respect. That was the first topic I like to explain. The second one is something that I lived with, something that could be compared, every comparison is a bit different, compared with what happened the 1st of August, the French Revolution, when some privileges were abandoned by the noble people. And this brings me back to a story in the territory of Beni, where we had about 6,000 pygmies living there. You see, about 6,000, because before that we never managed to change them. Whenever one was attempting to change them, they were taking flight instantly and disappeared in the darkest resorts of the forest. But one day, some tourists spotted them nearby the road, stopped, and approached them and ventured to visit their place. They happened to be close to the road at that time. And shy and fearful at the beginning, the pygmies soon realized that there was maybe some good money to earn, and rather easily, just by showing up, dancing for the white rich men. And so they started to do that. And the tourists, of course it was well known, the tourists started to stop there. And then those Bambuti, the tribe was called Bambuti. And after a few weeks they became arrogant and they were performing less and less and asking or demanding more and more money. And when the tourists were not happy with that and were leaving the place without paying anything, they were even throwing stones at their cars. So it became a bit annoying. And we decided that something had to be done. And I had an agricultural engineer, part of my staff, and he had a good idea. I say, I will organize that, let me organize that. He went to see them, and with the translation, because the Bambuti were not speaking Swahili, we were all speaking Swahili. With the help of some villagers, he explained them, we are going to mess it all up, the tourists will not stop anymore, and all the good money that we were digging up, you will just forget it. So let me arrange that. He arranged to lay out a small clearing in the forest, not too far from the road. He had some nicely wooden carved benches around the place, kind of kraal. There was even a restroom for the tourists and a curio shop where they could sell arrows, headgears, necklaces and bracelets. So it was and a tariff was established, an official tariff. You have to half an hour dance, that much, 1 hour dance, with music, without music, singing and so on. It was all tarified, and which they gladly accepted. And the important thing was that the money was not given to them directly. They trusted the agriculture engineer. We will put that in a Bambuti community chest. And with that money that we are collecting that way, we will buy for you salt, clothes, blankets, and so on. And not only that, but also we will buy you seeds. They never had sold anything. They just, they were like living in paradise between brackets. They all got almost naked, all over. And the only thing they were doing was hunting, fishing, picking wild fruit, or collecting honey in season. But they were not considered as human beings. They were in fact, although being the foremost inhabitants of the territory, they were belonging as a herd of hunting dogs to some nearby Bantu chiefs. Every important Bantu chief had his herd of pygmies, because masters as they were in killing elephants and other fleshy game, they were very useful to the Bantu chiefs. And it was a kind of slavery, but not as hard as one would imagine, because they got all they needed for the job. They got the weapons, lances, knives, nets, whatever. They were very clever in killing elephants. In fact, one trick that they had, because the elephant is always scenting if somebody is approaching. So they were really putting a kind of dirt of an elephant on them. They could approach very near, up to very close to the elephant. The elephant don't see very well. And then when they were under the elephant, they just cut the nerves of the feet, and the elephant, they had of course to take flight in time, whoop, and the elephant was there and could not move anymore. So very, very, very clever way of killing elephants. And I was just talking about seeds and agricultural equipment, tools, I should say. Because the agricultural engineer, professional as he was, said, you are nomads right now. Are you really happy with that? Who can tell the truth? But our mania to try to make other people happy the way we see it, sometimes ignoring what they really want, he said, let's try to change that. And anyway, it's not pleasant. It's really not pleasant for you to be not considered as human beings. You are just considered as hunting dogs. And if you become self-sufficient, if you have your own food, if you have your own village, and we will look after that, then we may negotiate you to become free. And it would have been sad, he told them, to go from savagery to decadence without knowing anything about civilization. So this was understood. They were not stupid, and they trusted the man, and so they started to see to their food, and then we had to negotiate with the Bantu chiefs about their freedom. So I called a big round table conference. There were no tables, we were sitting around in the village, and a kind of conference that lasted with all the Bantu chiefs concerned and the Pygmy chiefs as well, chiefs of tribes were there. And discussions lasted almost 3 days. And at the end of the third day, which was filled with lively palavers, came the historical decision, creating a technological revolution. The Bambutis, who were self-sufficient, who didn't need any patronizing anymore from their Bantu chiefs, they were officially declared free men. You know how they called before the villagers? They said the human beings, themselves, as if they were not belonging to humankind themselves. So from that they were very proud, and very proudly they received their first identity card. And 1 year after, and this is not ironic, they had the honor to pay tax, which is part, of course, of becoming, recognizing their full citizenship. It was only 10 francs per year, per capita, was the tax at that time, but they very gladly paid it because now we are human beings. So that was the second topic.
Interesting.
A third topic, if I may, is how we managed to improve the housing conditions in rural areas. My experience is limited to rural areas, and we have noticed that when traveling through the cities to reach our places, that already the government had done a lot to improve the housing conditions in the main towns and big cities, but that in rural areas there was a lot of room for improvement. And how to start with that? Of course, they had less income than the people living in the big cities at that time, because there were almost no jobless people. They all had a job. They were not allowed to live close to a city if they didn't have a job. So what we were noticing is that with the introduction of perennial cultures, such as coffee, cocoa, cotton, they were getting more income, more revenues. And also the fact that they had perennial cultures had as a consequence that the villages were no longer moving around as they were before, because they were cultivating their food, their daily food, and when the soil was completely empty, didn't give anymore, they were moving to another place and so on. But not with coffee or cotton, it has to remain at the same place. So the village remained at the same place. So it became interesting to do something to have a better house, better furniture. Also, there were 2 welfare funds at that time in the Congo. There was what we call Fonds du Bien-être Indigène, which can be translated a kind of native welfare fund. There was also the Fonds du Roi, the king, after the first trip that King Baudouin that time did in the Congo, he also had noticed that something had to be done to improve the housing conditions, and he created and donated money for Fonds du Roi, which is the king's fund. And those 2 funds, they could be tapped from by would-be owners of houses in hard material. Not just to put some iron sheets on your hut, but you have to build something nicely. You have to brick to cook, to have brick ovens and tiles, and then you will be helped by those funds. But again, how to start the ball rolling? And to start the ball rolling, just by coincidence, I noticed that there were quite a few young graduated carpenters, masons, and so on, who were looking for work and hadn't work. And they came to the territory and said, Wana, do you have some work for us? We can make good furniture, we can make frames, we can... so. And then came the idea, well, okay, I have an idea for you. We do it this way. you will build your own workshop. You will assemble your bench. And when it's ready, I will lend you a truckload of timber. And with that, you will make furniture for the community offices. We need chairs, tables, we are building some houses for the policemen. You will make all that. And then we will see how it goes. So they went, they made their workshop. It was with a very nice emblem on it, St. Joseph, because they were timbermen, they were carpenters, St. Joseph, workshop, independent workshop. And then they came, it's ready, one. Okay, I sent a truckload of timber from the territory's warehouse, and they started working. After a few weeks, they say, you can come and see when it's all ready. And we had of course decided what we would pay. Say, okay, that's what you have earned, and that's what you owe me. Because you owe us for the timber that you have received. You also have received some tools. If you want to keep them, that's the price. And say, okay, Buena, deduct everything. We want to be really independent, and we deducted from the bill, if I may say so, what they had been. And now say, and then they asked me another truckload. Can we borrow another truckload? I say, okay, yes, because now we would like to sell all that, to make that for the villagers. Because the villagers had already spotted that there was somebody making all that who was not paid directly by the territory. So they said, when we need something, we know where to go. And soon they were really overwhelmed with orders from the villagers all around. So they wanted furniture, some they built the frames for the house, even coffins. So everything they needed, they ordered to the people. To such an extent that after a while, there were 5, they split out, they called some of their comrades, former comrades from the school, saying, hey, come, it's a bonanza, we have here a good way of getting rich. So they assembled them, as I may say so, they over all the country. And after 3 years, I would say that about 80 villages had their own workshop, and that you could see when you were traveling on the road how better looking the houses were alongside the roads. So that's the second story. Communal institutions. Communal institutions is something that started only for a commune, so the organization, and also representation of the people for the community. We first had polls, elections organized for the native custom chiefries, and I will never forget the very first one. It was with a tribe, the Watalinga, living very close to the Ugandan border. And they were very, I should say, family organized. The chief was the chief of the family of the clan, and they were organized. And I had to go there and say, well, the Belgians in Brussels, I told them, they have decided that you will elect a council. Elect a council. What's a council, they asked me. Well, some people who will assist the chief in his decisions. Oh, yeah, but we have that. The elderly people are there. They do that quite well. Why should we elect them? Well, I say, don't worry, don't worry. The Belgian people in Belgium, they like it. They like to bring you democracy. Democracy, what's that? Yes, the people have the right to rule themselves. You don't have to blindly obey to a chief which is imposed. They say we don't impose at all. It's the custom who has designated him. And the custom is not anybody. The custom is us. You know. We stop quarreling. It's a game, said they. It's a game, okay. Then they were quite happy. So asked them, we can do it right away. What are your candidates? Candidates. They were the people who venture to become. I said, who is candidate? And then they designated candidates, you're quite right. And it's not a coincidence, but of course the 3 or 4 elderly people, they were among them. And then, yes, but then they never put some other ones to make it a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of suspense, you know, but otherwise okay, it's part of the game, it's part of the game. Okay, everybody obeyed. And there we were with 6 candidates. They said, now we will now prepare 6 boxes. We put them in a hut. We will blindfold the windows and nobody can see what happens inside. Oh, and we will have to go inside the darkness, but the spirits will see us, and so that's not good. You have to put at least some kind of lamp, you know, some kind of light inside. Okay, light inside, no problem. And how will we be able to recognize one urn, one pole box from the other? I say, well, you can put an emblem. So for one, it was. Could I say what do you call that to make in the fields to yes, a shovel. Yes, that's it. Yes, another one was a flower and things like that. So everybody has his emblem. So now you line up nicely and one by one you enter, which they did, and of course the 3 elderly people were elected, the other not. They came out and said, voilà. Now you are Democrats. You have elected your own representatives at the Chiefs Council. And there was a cheers and so they danced the whole night to celebrate the event. So that was the very first election that we organized. And then in '59, the decision came that also the territory, where myself as Chief Territorial Administrator or Officer, we use several words to translate it. Sometimes I don't like so much administrator because it looks a little bit like a civil servant sitting all day behind his desk. An officer make me also think of the army. So I use either administrator or officer, but anyway territorial, because we were this in charge of territory. So the territory also have to have a council with white representatives and native representatives. And then that was a good way to educate people to take political responsibilities. And for those first, that was in '59, so 1 year only before independence, for those elections, the Belgian government in Brussels was clever enough to ask the local administration how to organize it, and not just decide how it should be organized up to Belgian metropolitan standards. And the local administration told them, look, many of the people, especially in the rural areas, especially the older people, the young people, they all can read and write, but the older people, they can't. So we have to find something that everybody can understand. So that's why the idea of having one poll box per candidate was retained. And in my territory, we had about 80 places for elections, and in all of the 80 places, we had to supply them with 30 boxes, because there were about 30 candidates. So that was a lot of work for the independent artisans to get some earnings, and it was ready on time, and the elections went on quite well, because we were still in charge of supervising how it should be done. So we avoided, of course, that some people were asking more poll tickets or tokens that they were allowed to, because some of the big fat people, they were asking 2 or 3, because I have 4 wives, so I can have 3 or 4 tokens. And everybody won, and the elections went quite well. And I think if we had more time, because they had 1 full year to work, and as a Chief Territorial Administrator, I really played the game, the political game, to submit important decisions to the, to the approval of the Council. And I must say that sometimes very wise advices came, not only from the white men as we would have expected with a kind of superiority complex, but from the natives. And I was astonished and I was amazed to see how pragmatic they were. And I can say that it was running quite smoothly. And the only thing that I regret is that we didn't have more time to prepare more people. Because when independence came in 1960, we had to organize general elections at that time. The territorial officers were still in charge of organizing it from a logistic point of view, but no more did we have the right to intervene. And what happened is that sometimes when a political party was more powerful than the other, he was just chasing all the other people. He was taking all the poll boxes from other parties out of the room, leaving only their own, putting flowers around and so on, a guard, and all the people, they had to put their only in those boxes. And we could only notice, make a report. We were not allowed to intervene and to stop that. So when one says now that Lubumba, for instance, was elected democratically, I say no. He was elected that way, I mean, by pressure from his own politician. But I promised to talk especially much more about pre-independence, independence time. And I have therefore a last topic, that I would like to explain, and that's how we were involved in justice, in custom, especially the custom justice, the natives' custom justice, because we had the Belgian law for the white people assimilated, and we respected the customs for their own private matters, provided they were not against public order and morals, you know. And what happened is that quite often, as my colleague told you, we had to travel 20 days a month in the bush. They were waiting for our next visit to submit us the most difficult cases that they had not been able to solve by themselves. So they were waiting for me. And at the beginning, when I arrived, they said, "What, we have a case, can we explain?" Hey, let me just settle down and pack and so on with people. Okay, this afternoon we start. And we call the judges and the policeman on duty of the chiefry, and we started the hearings. And after hearing party A explaining his case, defending his case, I said, the guy is right. How can the other possibly be right? He's right. Okay, I'm a lawyer, but just to make sure I will listen to the other party. And then came party B, and to my astonishment, again, he managed to convince me. So, who's right now? Who's right? And then I had to very modestly turn to the judges and ask them, what do you think about it? Who's right? And then a sigh, Buana, do you have time? They knew that white people are always in a hurry. I have time, said. I would like to really to clear that matter. The whole afternoon, and the evening. And part of the night if necessary to solve the problem. Okay, so then they shouted, the policeman shouted out, everybody out. So that means only the judges remained seated with the policeman on duty, and then one by one they called all the intervenants, all the people, the witness and so on. Coming up, explaining their case and so on. And to my amazement, I saw really something like a network, you know, or a puzzle assembling itself. And after that, arriving, so on, by discussing by the judges, a very clear picture. And then the judges told me, I think we may suggest a solution that could please everybody. And here, for me, as, should I say, Latin or even German educated people, for us it's sometimes black or white, or let's say right or wrong. But for them, no. Nothing is black or white or right or wrong. I think there is always something right, something wrong. And they're only happy when they manage to find a solution by consensus that could please everybody, that could prevent any party from losing face, and more important, because they live in villages, enable them to still continue to live in the village. Because if one has an overwhelming victory, the other party has no other choice left than to leave the village. And we called them, and then the judge explained me, please, would you then the decision that we propose them, not that we impose, that we propose them. And I told them, look, we have listened to you carefully, we have consulted each other, and this is the solution that we have found. And if you agree with that, I think that will bring peace again in the village. And first there were some murmurs because each party had expected a bit more. But the fact that both of them were a bit disappointed was the best proof that it was the best solution. And finally they realized that it was the good solution. And there were cheers and so on. And then again they danced the whole night, I couldn't sleep. And it was done. And I was very impressed by the Bantu wisdom and their pragmatism to solve that kind of problem. Sometimes it was not always possible, and I'll just tell you one story where it had not been possible, and that was the case of a dowry. You know that for custom wedding, the groom had to bring a dowry to the bride, just the reverse of in old days in our countries. And it's a kind of a caution, or it's a kind of a band, whatever, a kind of should I say, it's a kind of way to stabilize the union. Because if he wants to send the wife back home, to repudiate the wife will very soon come back with a kick in her, from her father, who will tell her, I don't have the dowry anymore. So you have to go back to your husband, because I don't have the dowry anymore. And for that case, the father of the bride had still the dowry, so he brought some, should I say, some very worn out agricultural tools, and the husband claimed it, so torn out. And when I gave them, they were new. I said, yes, but the wife that you have returned isn't new anymore. So that was a clear-cut case, and the father of the bride got right. But again, wisdom, pragmatism, and that's it, yes. So I will stop here because I would like to leave room for questions from you yourself.
All right, very good. It seems like such a complex system, like all the ways that the colonials would deal with the native cultures. How did that system develop? Was it here or in Belgium, or did it develop over there over time, or how did that all develop?
No, I would say it could only develop on the spot there.
Huh.
In Belgium, in fact, of course, we heard a little bit of things like that, but we went there with the idea that we were bringing them everything. Mm-hmm. That they were just savages, that they were just lacking everything. No education, that they were really having nothing, and that we, as good colonizers, they would bring everything. But this is an impression that left us after a few months already living with them, and we learned a lot from them.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another impression that we had another one. I have to say that when I went to the Congo, it was in '52. I was just graduated from university, just newly wed, because my father had told me, my mother already died a few years ago, told me, if you go to the Congo, you better go married. Okay, so I married, and I'm still with the same one, so it was a good choice. And we went there, and we had really endured the 4 years of Nazi occupation by the Germans. Mm-hmm. And my first impression was, I'm going to the country. After all, they haven't asked me to come there. They haven't asked us, Belgium, to come there. Aren't we going to be considered like occupants, like people coming to their country and without being asked for? And so when I arrived, I was a bit shy, but that's an impression that really disappeared instantly. The very moment that we crossed the boundary, like you did, in Dilolo, after having had 3 days train from Lobito, we crossed the Belgian Congo boundary in the middle of the night. And in the middle of the night, the villages were all the people were gathering around the rail track, cheering, so welcome, welcome, welcome. And I said, that's not exactly what we did with the Germans when they came to our country. So we seem to be welcome. Oh, that's new. And really, that was something refreshing for us. And that impression should I say, leave such an impression, remained with me all the time I was there. The only thing that they demanded is that we would always be really right with them. Same justice for all, no partiality. To defend them if they had a quarrel dispute with a white man, a Portuguese, whatever, that if they were right, they should get right. And not that we were protecting any kind of other people. So that's the impression that I had.
Did you ever feel like an outsider, or did you immediately feel like you were part of the culture?
As an outsider.
Yeah. When you got there, did you feel like you were part of their group, or did you always feel like outside?
Well, yes and no. I still felt, of course, as an outsider. I wouldn't say that I was keeping apologizing when someone approaching them, because we had a saying that we had to dominate for serving them. So we had to use our authority to the best of their benefits. So I was not trying to amalgamate with them, to behave like them, but I was trying to do my utmost to understand them and to kind of foresee their reactions. I said it's needless to try to impose something like that, because they will never accept it, or they will do it just to please me, but it will not last. So better convince than impose something.
What are you most proud of that you accomplished there?
Yes. The fact that I made people self-sufficient, independent, proud of their work, and not beggars. I think we have a Nobel Prize with Father Pierre, who said it's needless to give a fish to the poor people, but you have to learn them fishing. So that was something like that.
Yes. Very good.
Did you come up with the idea of pretty much the furniture store?
Yes.
Did you come up with that idea? How did that whole process start?
With the furniture. Yes, because I see there was a kind of a club in my territory, which was called King Baudouin, was very popular, King Baudouin Club, and the evaluated people, what they called evaluated people, I mean, almost assimilated with the white people, Western people. They were gathering every Sunday, drinking beer and so chatting, they had books and so on. And quite often I managed every Sunday to go there just to drink a glass of beer with them, listen to them and answer their questions, you see. And they told me there's something that we are missing. We would like to have some good furniture. But we don't have time, or we don't have the money to go to the main town of Goma or Bukavu, and it is so expensive there. Why can't we have some furniture made here? You have carpenters on the territory to make the furniture that you need in the office, in your homes. Can we also tap from that source, from that well? They let me think it over. And that's how the idea came. To have their own people, and then they were telling them what they wanted, what kind of chair. Not our style, their style. Yeah.
It seems like, from what I see in the press and written and so forth, that this period is kind of misunderstood. What do you think are the main things that are misunderstood about the colonial period?
The main thing is that even our compatriots, they have now the impression, especially after the independence, that it was a one-way story. That every benefit was for us, was for the Belgians. And in fact, it was a win-win situation. We were bringing stuff. Of course, we were not philanthropes, not we. Missionaries were, not we. Not the enterprise, not the mining companies. And if they were feeding well their employees, it was not for the pleasure of seeing well-fed people. It was because a well-fed employee works better than somebody who is starving. So, but that's what I call a win-win situation. But even by doing that, you can do it the way that I say, you can do it decently, or you can do just a minimum, and get maximum out of them and give them a minimum. And I think we have been generous in giving all what we could give them. But the only thing that we have been a bit too conservative and too shy is in promoting high-level education. The only instances who did it were the church.
Yeah.
We had the churches, we had the bishops. We had already priests, and we had a bishop, so a native bishop. But in the administration, in the army, the highest rank was adjutant. What we call adjutant is first sergeant, a little bit higher than first sergeant major. And no lieutenant, no something like that. So that was, I see, we were a bit too shy. The other way around are the French. The French had already people at the university long before World War II. The Governor General of Brazzaville, of the French Congo, was a black man. Something unthinkable in just across the river in Leopoldville. And I remember, because my father was at that time in the army in Belgian Congo, he had even the chic, if I can say so, when he came over, he was there with his orderly, and mind you, the orderly was a French white officer. So you had the black Governor General with a French orderly with his suitcase. And
this black man came from North America.
Eboué.
He was
Yes.
not an African.
It's not a true born African. But anyway,
And one must say they were in contact in Senegal for more than
250
3 centuries.
Yes.
that's true. No, the French had a much longer colonial history. And the last thing that I would like to mention is how you could really recognize the African people after their colonizers. I was living close to Uganda, and when some black people from Uganda were coming over, I could immediately say, you come from Uganda. Why? Because he was really dressed the British way, with very well pressed shorts, and his socks up to the knees, sometimes even with a little bit, a little ribbon in, so that's what it. And if some come from the French, he was more, you say, like easygoing. If he came from Angola, he had a sad face. And from the Belgian Congo, the Congolese, they were always kind of, good humored. They were smiling, they were laughing, they were taking it easy. It was really striking to see the difference after the colonizer.
It's worse today.
What were
Still
the
today.
what were the lessons that you learned for yourself, for your life from this time period, do you think?
What was there?
What did you learn for yourself, for your own life from this time period?
To be happy with very little things. And to manage in the worst possible circumstances. They had a solution for everything. We had no running water, and just to solve that problem for baths, they imagined. We made a kind of oven, and on top of that we put 4 very big
barrels.
yes.
Barrels.
Yes.
Barrels.
That they used to 200 liters where we used to put used to put gasoline and things like that. To empty, we could put them upright, and then there was another one which was across the oven. And they said you have to bring the water. There were 2 openings in those vats. So the cold water you put underneath, and the warm water will come out from the upper hole. And there we put our tubes to go to the bathroom. So we had warm water every day, thanks as they had invented it. So that was something, some tricks like that, Also, as you told Louis, my colleague told about they were able to make bread everywhere. And they,
In a termite,
and on
in a
Sunday,
termite hill.
Termite hill.
My first oven was in a termite hill.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
The
an
termite
empty
hill.
one, of
Oh,
course.
that was standard in Congo.
An empty
Standard.
Could you tell us about that?
Bread
How
baking.
they make bread in a termite hill?
oh yes.
Ah.
Well, of course we bought the wheat with us, so they first made an oven like that, a fire with big stones and a sheet on top of it, and when it was burning quite well, then you had the ashes, and it's still very, very hot, and they took the ashes and they put on top of the shield and the bread underneath, and the bread cooked like that.
Very good. Well, I think that's all my questions. Does anyone have any other questions that they were interested in? Kara? Anybody?
Oh, very good.
Yeah, very good. Oh, let me get that for you. Yeah, nice work.